The following program is sponsored by CBN.
Coming up, on the hunt for Al-Qaeda.
As soon as I entered the room, they opened fire.
One SEAL is perfectly wounded.
I've almost died multiple times, and I'm still here.
And has the bullet holes to prove it.
Still covered in blood.
Then, surrounded by Vietcong.
We started taking artillery, rocket fire.
A Green Beret takes flak on the battlefield.
Most of the buildings above ground were leveled.
How did he make it out alive?
He was the only reason that I survived that battle.
On today's 700 Club.
Well, it's Veterans Day, folks, and we salute our veterans and thank the Lord for their service. So many have been wounded and died in the defense of their country, and I'm just glad I happen to be one of them. I served in the 1st Marine Division in Korea a long time ago. But we salute our veterans today. But in the process of saluting them, we think of what's going on in our country. And it's unclear who the next president will be. That's what the White House press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, says, because of too much uncertainty in too many states. What evidence of wrongdoing does the Trump team have so far? Kayleigh runs it all down in this interview with David Brody.
Kayleigh, hey, great to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Good to join you, David. Thanks for having me.
And from there, our conversation centered on electoral votes and legal mayhem. There are lawsuits galore from Georgia to Michigan to Nevada and Pennsylvania. Allegations of voter fraud and irregularities that McEnany says need time to be brought to light.
All we are saying is let's press pause, allow the courts to look at what happened, and then we can move forward united as a country. But we believe asking for transparency should be a good thing, and it's amazing with the Democrats. They tried to delegitimize the 2016 election for 4 years. All we're asking is for transparency, and we have the media attacking us simply for asking to put light on the system.
They especially feel Pennsylvania needs attention.
You have people like the Secretary of State, an avowed anti-Trump individual who's out there and saying we're going to move Election Day to 3 days after the election in Pennsylvania by accepting ballots that come in 3 days later and setting up disparate systems. Our lawsuit in Pennsylvania alleges equal protection issues that in a place like Philadelphia, they were finding out which ballots did not have secrecy envelopes, contacting those voters in a predominantly blue county, allowing them to cure their ballots, come in and vote provisionally, and no red counties were doing the same.
McEnany also says they've collected evidence of alleged wrongdoing in Michigan.
There are affidavits. I have them here. There are 131 of them that attestations to voter fraud. One, in fact, was a city election official who'd worked there for decades, who says that they were telling voters to vote for Joe Biden, encouraging them to backdate ballots.
What do you say to the critics who say, well, where is the widespread voter fraud to overturn, let's say, tens of thousands of ballots in multiple states? What's the answer to that?
Well, so the answer is two-part. First, we do have several attestations to witnesses of voter fraud. We can't even begin to see how deep this goes until our poll watchers are allowed in the building. We know that with 680,000 ballots in Pennsylvania, our poll watchers weren't there to watch. So until we get meaningful access into these ballots, we won't truly be able to see how far it goes. But to me, the systemic issue, the most important issue, David, is this equal protection provision, and it goes widespread.
Democrats and much of the media are highly skeptical. Yet McEnany calls this a political strategy. So you say the Democrat Party is welcoming fraud and welcoming illegal voting. What were you trying to say, or what did you mean by that exactly?
If you are against looking at voter eligibility, making sure the voting rolls don't have dead people on them, making sure that everyone there is a live, active voter, if you are against making sure that signatures are verified and double-checked, then you are welcoming voter fraud. You are welcoming it by asking for the converse, which is exactly what Democrats have done in several states across the country.
So how does this all end?
You know, I think at this point it probably will make its way up to the Supreme Court. Right now we're at the district court level, and we will see how they rule in Pennsylvania and on our upcoming lawsuits here in Michigan and elsewhere. And I think it's really anyone's guess where this goes.
David Brody, CBN News.
You know, an English writer some centuries ago said, "We will arrest a man who steals a goose from off the common, But what do we do for the man who steals the common from under the goose? I have pretty good source, and I have not confirmed, that there's much, much worse things going on than what you're hearing about. One of these is apparently a server in Germany that has 60 million voter files of our voters, Germany. We also understand that, you remember Brendan and Clapper during the Obama era, there's some thought that they had a software program working that would delete certain votes from one candidate and add them to the rolls of another.
Well, we saw that in Wisconsin.
But I'm talking about big time. I'm not just talking about 10, but I'm talking about systematic. And I'm also told, and I haven't verified, that one of the big firms that counts votes is also owned by Nancy Pelosi's husband. I don't know that, and I want to say I haven't verified it. This just came from what looks like a very good source. I don't know. But ladies and gentlemen, Lindsey Graham said it right. The way things are set up now, there's no chance for any Republican to be elected to office unless we change the system. And there was a bipartisan commission some time ago, President Jimmy Carter and a representative of the Bush administration who had a bipartisan commission, and they pointed to the fact that absentee votes, that these ballots that are cast by absentees and that are the greatest source of fraud. And we cannot allow it there. We must, absolutely must change our system. We want to know that our leaders are elected properly, and if they are, we want to obey them and honor them as our leaders. But we don't want crooks in office. We don't want people cheating, and we certainly don't want people stealing the green from under the goose. Yes.
I was wrong. It was Michigan where that computer glitch that turned 6,000 Trump votes into Biden votes. I said Wisconsin, but it was actually Michigan.
Michigan, which I thought Michigan would be a Trump state, and I thought the candidate for Senate would win up there, but he didn't. He's a very capable man, James, but he didn't get elected. But folks, we've got to change the system. It's absolutely imperative. And even so, they're still counting. There's still massive fraud, and we need to get to the root of the system, and especially if they're big operations cooking the ballots. Now, in other news, nationwide, Republicans are doing better. Now they flipped another seat in the House and are one step closer to holding on to the Senate. Ephraim Graham has more on that.
Pat, although Democrats won the 218 seats needed for a majority in the House of Representatives, their margin is now much smaller. They've lost several seats in this election, including in Southern California, where a Republican challenger ousted the Democrat incumbent. About a dozen more races are still undecided. In the Senate, Republicans now have a one-seat lead after Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina won his race. 3 seats are still outstanding there. In Alaska, the Republican candidate is leading. Control of the Senate is expected to come down to Georgia, where 2 runoff races will be held on January 5th. Pat?
I understand that there's some disputed ballots, maybe as many as 3,600 or so. If they were added to Sonny Perdue's numbers, he wouldn't have to have a runoff. Otherwise, the seat that's now being held by Mrs. Loeffler, Senator Loeffler, was the unexpired seat of Johnny Isakson, who retired, and that extends through the end of this year. So there are 2 seats in Georgia that are so important. Now, Tillis seats won. The one in Alaska will win, which will give the Republicans 50 seats. If the Democrats pick up the 2 in Georgia, then it'll be 50-50. And if indeed Biden-Harris win, then Kamala Harris will preside over the Senate, and she in turn will be the deciding vote in any tie.
We need to pray for Georgia.
Well, it's crucial, and it looks like the key down there is the ground game. I think Sonny Perdue has got a guy named Ostroff They say he's kind of like the Beto O'Rourke of Georgia. But it doesn't matter who he is. It could be Lassie and Lassie's daughter running. It wouldn't matter. They would be going to get another Democrat. So it's going to be. You talk about money. I wouldn't be at all surprised if $1 billion didn't come into Georgia to flip those lists.
If we get the two, and if they get the two in Georgia, then that's 52, right? It'd be 52. It's 49.
They lost two. They lost. They lost one in Colorado. They lost McSally in Arizona. But they held on to Maine, and they held on to other seats, but to Tom Tillis. But it's 50-50. I mean, and you're right. If those two go Republican, the Republican will have a 52 majority. That's correct. But it's crucial. So all the nation is going to be looking at Georgia. And as I say, the ground game is going to be crucial because the turnout in a non-presidential special election is much, much lower than a presidential one. So there'll be a much smaller electorate. And it's the question of who's knocking on the doors and who's making telephone calls in this particular interim period. So we got to pray for America. Ephraim?
Pat, with the presidential election still contested, one major consequence is U.S. policy on Iran. President Trump has isolated the Islamic regime with crippling sanctions. But there are concerns former Vice President Joe Biden might reverse those policies as president. Chris Mitchell reports.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Reuven Rivlin congratulated Joe Biden Sunday after his victory address. While final results could be tied up in the courts for weeks, Israeli leaders are already looking at one major foreign policy difference between President Trump and a potential Biden administration.
The main concern for us is the Iranian issue. Vice President Biden said very clearly that he wants to re-enter the JCPOA, the agreement with the Iranians. He wants to improve it. But we know the Iranians, they will play their games. They will continue with deception, with lies. And at the end of the day, they will have the same agreement.
The Obama administration forged the nuclear deal in 2015, and President Trump ended it in 2018. Former Vice President Biden and Senator Kamala Harris are on record to renew the deal. Their website states if Tehran returns to compliance with the deal, President Biden would re-enter the agreement, using hard-nosed diplomacy and support from our allies to strengthen and extend it. CBN News reached out to the Biden campaign asking if there has been any change. They have not responded as of airtime.
We are worried about it, and if the U.S. will decide to re-enter the JCPOA without making the crucial changes, Israel will have to recalculate our approach to the nuclear race of Iran.
Former Israeli ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, tells CBN News what that recalculation entails.
We will say very clearly, we will keep all options on the table. We will not allow the Iranians to obtain nuclear capabilities. So we will do whatever is necessary. We have the means to make sure that it will never happen, and we mean it.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
One of many things to watch. Pat?
Chris is now going to join us from Jerusalem. And Chris, the Trump administration has isolated Iran by fostering peace deals between Israel and Sunni Arab nations. What do you think? Would Joe Biden continue that?
Well, Pat, Biden has said that he would support the deals with the UAE, Bahrain, and Sudan. But the question is, would he expand on those deals? And the experts we've talked to kind of differ. Ambassador Danon, you just saw in our report, he believes a Biden administration would pursue the Abraham Accords. However, former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Michael Oren, he sees a Biden administration pivoting to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and not pursuing the Abraham Accords. You know, Pat, someone made the point that the biggest foreign policy achievement of the Obama administration was the Abraham Accords. Why would they say that? Because the nuclear deal in 2015 so frightened these Sunni Arab nations that they've literally run into the arms of Israel, the one nation in the region that can really stand up to Iran.
Well, the Iranians have made it clear over and over again that they see the annihilation of Israel as the main focus of their foreign policy. And so if they get nukes, they will clearly use them against Israel. And when the Obama people made that agreement, they didn't really stop Iran from enriching uranium and doing some of the things they were doing. There was a temporary pause, and after that, the ceiling was off. What do you think they'll do now?
Well, Pat, they've said either whether it's Biden or Trump, you know, they want to destroy Israel. They're very clear about that. And the question is, what is the U.S. going to do? We talked to U.S. Ambassador David Friedman. He told us that Iran right now is on the economic ropes, and it would be a disaster to renew the deal like the Biden administration says it would if they get into office. It would literally throw them an economic lifeline. Since 2018, the Trump administration has had their maximum pressure campaign, sanctions on oil, banking, even individuals. So the impact on Iran has been profound. The economy shrunk almost 5% in 2018, about 10% in 2019. The currency lost about half its value. And all this led to those protests, Pat, that we saw last year in Iran. So what did the nuclear deal do? It gave Iran billions of dollars. It was used by Iran to spread terror in the region. So unless the deal is changed significantly, it would likely reinstate what critics said was a flawed deal. The sunset clause, weak safeguards, it allowed uranium enrichment, and it didn't address the ballistic missiles. And it led to the path of a nuclear bomb. According to many here in Israel, one Israeli minister said it could lead to war. And so it would reinstate this policy of appeasement toward Iran. Now, you know, Pat, I'm sure you've heard this. Churchill's definition of an appeaser is one who feeds a crocodile, hoping that it will eat him last.
Chris, one last thing. Soleimani was head of the Quds Force, and the Trump guys took him out. Has Iran ever stopped wanting to destroy Trump? Don't you think they want to kill him if they get a chance?
I think they would if they had the chance, Pat. Certainly, that could lead to a world war if they really did that. But certainly, they see Trump as probably their #1 enemy. You know, a lot of people said when Soleimani was taken out that it's going to lead to regional war. What it actually did, Pat, was actually suppress and actually push back on Iran. So contrary to what other people were saying, really, there's been relative peace between Iran right now. And I would say the mullahs, even though they're saying no one way or the other, they would prefer, I think, a deal with a future potential Biden administration as opposed to what they've been dealing with for the last 4 years with President Trump.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate your insights, Wendy.
All right. Well, today is Veterans Day, and we want to salute the men and women of our armed forces. Coming up, a Medal of Honor recipient. He rescued wounded soldiers scattered across the battlefield. But who saved his life? Then, the call no one ever wants to get. A military wife is told her husband had taken the full force of an IED. So what happened next? But first, ambushed by al-Qaeda, a Navy SEAL is hit by 27 bullets and a grenade. How did he survive the attack and take out the terrorists? See his death-defying story when we come back.
Your shows, the stories you care about, anytime you want, anywhere you want. Download the CBN News app today.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe and let us know where you're watching from in the comments below.
Tomorrow.
A lot of pain in my right wrist.
Sidelined and suffering.
It is a horribly crippling disease.
With no end in sight.
She wasn't getting relief.
And her pain was only part of the struggle.
How can I do this if I don't have my hands to work with?
Now see the healing that stunned the doctors.
There was not a medical reason for those test results to come back normal.
On the next 700 Club.
Well, again, we're saluting our veterans, and especially those who've been wounded. It breaks your heart to think that people's bodies have been maimed and they're paralyzed, crippled because of war injuries. But war is horrible. It was said war is hell, and I absolutely believe it. Perfectly wounded, though. That's how one doctor described former Navy SEAL Mike Day after he was shot. Get this, 27 times. And yet Mike survived. It's also the title of his new memoir. So why does he believe God spared his life? And why is he considering a run for governor? How about that? Mark Martin brings us this story.
It still has all the bullet holes in it, still covered in blood. It's ripped in the back here.
Retired Navy SEAL Senior Chief Mike Day shows me body armor that helped protect him in a battle with al-Qaeda terrorists in Iraq.
What is this here? Talk about this.
Well, this is what we call an LBE, load-bearing equipment. So this is what you carry your radio in, your magazines, and it's actually loaded up pretty much the way it was that night.
That night in April 2007 in Anbar province, Day's team of Navy SEALs and Iraqi scouts were on the hunt for a high-level al-Qaeda cell. He says the terrorists had shot down helicopters. Being the first to enter a 12-by-12 room where 4 al-Qaeda leaders waited to strike proved to be almost deadly.
As soon as I entered the room, they opened fire, and I lost my rifle. I transitioned to my pistol, and I killed the guy down the left wall as I was coming off my feet. And I landed right next to him.
When the gunfight was over, Day took out all 4 terrorists in the room, but not before being shot 27 times and hit with grenade shrapnel.
So all of this equipment you were wearing the night that you got shot 27 times?
Correct.
Day first shared his miraculous story with CBN News 6 years ago. Now he has a new book called Perfectly Wounded, a memoir about what happens after a miracle. He says the title came from a comment made by an emergency room doctor.
So he got to see all manner of gunshot wounds, stab wounds. I mean, he saw, if you work in the ER, you get to see all that stuff.
True.
And I was explaining to him where I'd been shot, and his response was, well, you were just perfectly wounded.
Do you believe that God spared your life?
Yeah, I do. A lot of people will look at that whole gunfight. No, you got shot 27 times and walked away from it. You're here for a reason. I think I'm just starting to find out that I actually am. I look at the rest of my life and how protected I've been. I haven't talked to these people, my guardian angels, but I've almost died multiple times, and I'm still here.
What do you hope people take away from the book?
Maybe a way to help build resiliency, and I don't want to give advice. I don't. I'm like, this is how I did it. That's pretty much what the book's about. How I suffered trauma like everybody's going to, and how I built the resiliency to get through the next one.
Although Day doesn't want to give advice, he does offer this to those who may deal with tough times in their own lives.
If all you do is sit on a couch and watch TV and eat bad food, when something really bad happens, you don't have the training, you don't have the practice to get through that. And it can become overwhelming, and it's going to dump you into a hole. So it's just a mindset of training and practicing to build resiliency. And that means getting up and working out. Push yourself just a tiny bit. I like to end my showers with cold water. Knocks the steam down in the room, and it also provides that shock. And I think if you practice physical resiliency, it's going to also build your psychological resiliency and vice versa.
Before writing the book, Day spent his life giving back. He worked at the U.S. Special Operations Command Warrior Care Program, also called the CARE Coalition, helping service members. He's also taught free fall to military personnel and Special Operations Urban Combat to SEAL teams. Senior Chief Day is also in the process of starting a nonprofit organization called Warrior Tribe. It will provide resiliency education for young people, veterans, and trauma survivors. The retired Navy SEAL is also considering running for governor of Virginia because of his concern that constitutional rights are being taken away.
Yeah, very preliminary. I don't really want to do it. But when I get scared, and I'm kind of scared right now when I'm watching, when I get scared, I go fight. I don't cower. My fight or flight reflex tells me to go fight. And I'm kind of scared right now about what's going on.
Day definitely did not cower that night in 2007 in Iraq when he nearly lost his life.
Why is it important to you to keep this?
Because I want to be able to remember. I mean, it's a treasured possession of mine because it helps me remember and know more. And I don't want to forget it.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for your service, too, as well. Most definitely.
No, gee, I got kicked out of high school. Had nothing else to do.
No, it's very honorable, your service.
Well, I'm lucky I got to do it.
Mark Martin, CBN News, Virginia Beach.
What a hero. And if you run for governor, you've got my vote. Well, we just watched one story of a perfectly wounded soldier. Now see another through the eyes of his wife. She'll take us inside her family's long road to recovery. Plus, outnumbered and outgunned, this Green Beret was in the crosshairs of 10,000 Vietcong. And that's where he felt something greater than fear. What exactly went down on that battlefield? You'll see right after this.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe and let us know where you're watching from in the comments below.
Dear God, please help kids who don't have warm beds and blankets, who don't feel good and want to get better. And help mommies and daddies to find something to eat for their kids. Not just on Happy Thanksgiving Day, but every day. And please, God, help me.
During this season of giving thanks, you can also give to those in need. Please consider donating to CBN what you would normally spend on a Thanksgiving meal to help hurting people here at home and around the world. Because you can make a difference every day in the lives of those who need it most. Please give now.
Rockets exploded all around him. Mortars rained down on him relentlessly. Gary Bykirk was deep in the jungle of Vietnam when he and his fellow soldiers were ambushed. Well, how did Gary escape that brutal day? And why did his real battle begin the day after? Take a look.
And now the end has come.
People often ask me, were you ever afraid that you're going to die? And I tell them that I wasn't, because in the midst of that battle, I've experienced something that was greater than fear.
Long before he received the Medal of Honor for his actions on the front lines of the Vietnam War, Gary Bykirk was just an aimless college kid in search of purpose.
I decided I was going to quit school and I was going to go into the Green Berets because of the training, their purpose, their mission. That's what I wanted.
He got his wish in 1967 at 20 years old when he became a Special Forces combat medic for the Green Berets.
Attaining the Green Beret was a tremendous, tremendous sense of accomplishment for me. So I looked forward to going to Vietnam as a chance to fulfill the dream.
That was until he discovered where he was headed, Camp Duc Sayang in the heart of the Vietnam jungle. Luckily, nearby was a remote Montagnard village where he befriended a 15-year-old soldier named Deo.
I said to this young Montagnard boy, I said, I want you to teach me how to survive in the jungle because I'm afraid of snakes and I really don't want to run into any tigers. He said, I don't want to teach you how to survive. He said, I want to teach you how to live. And he became my mentor. He became my bodyguard. We developed a sense of camaraderie that taught me so much about life.
Just before dawn on April 1, 1970, 10,000 North Vietnamese mounted an assault on the camp.
We started taking artillery, rocket fire for hours, and then the ground assault started. Most of the Americans were wounded. Most of the buildings above ground were leveled.
While shielding an injured soldier from a mortar shell, Gary was hit. Metal fragments from the exploding rocket ripped into his spine.
There was somebody next to me and picked me up. And I looked and it was Dale. And I said to him, how did you find me in the midst of this? He said, this is where I belong, with you.
Gary could barely walk, but through a hail of enemy gunfire, he continued to rescue fallen comrades with the help of Deo.
When he couldn't drag me, I dragged him. It was a love that overcame the fear of dying. We heard a rocket coming in. He rolled me over, the rocket exploded, and Deo was killed protecting me. He was the only reason that I survived that battle. But my greatest battle happened a few days later in the hospital.
Partially paralyzed by shrapnel and wounded by 3 bullets, Gary fought for his life.
It was my hand-to-hand combat with death. One time I came to, there was a chaplain that was standing over me. And he said, "Would you like to pray?" And I said, "I don't know how to pray. I don't even know who to pray to." He said, "That's okay. God knows how to listen." I said, "God, if you're real, I need you." Something that came over me brought me a sense of love, a sense of, you're not alone. I will be with you. And I said, I got to find out what's out there. Who is that that's out there?
His curiosity stuck with him through 10 months of physical therapy. Once he learned to walk again, he visited the one person he thought might be able to help, his Christian cousin Jan and her husband Buck. When he asked about God, they handed him a New Testament and said, "Read it."
I read through John 15, where he says that, "As the Father has loved me, Gary, so have I loved you. You have not chosen me, Gary, but I have chosen you to bring forth much fruit." At that moment, I realized that Jesus was the God that I met in a hospital bed, and that he had a plan for me. I knelt down and I accepted Christ as my Savior.
While he felt some joy, a war was waging in his soul.
There are many demons and things that you fight during a war, and those things become voices that you hear in your head over and over and over again, and they haunt you.
So he took his fight to a cave in New Hampshire, where he fought for his very soul.
I fought a battle in my own heart and my own mind. I said, "God, I wouldn't be alive if it weren't for you and your grace. I'm giving you my life totally. Whatever you want for my life, that's all I want."
2 weeks after that prayer, Gary received the Medal of Honor. For Gary, it's a symbol of love.
It's not about me. It's not about anything that I've done. It's about the millions of other men and women who serve. It's about dying to yourself, caring for others. It's about God and what God has done. Without his grace, I wouldn't have survived Vietnam, and without his forgiveness and his love, I never would have come out of that cave.
Gary married, earned degrees in both psychology and sociology, worked as a counselor, and now serves as a chaplain. He shares his story with anyone searching for purpose.
Significance comes when you find out that God has a plan for your life, and you say, "God, I will follow your plan." And then you let God use you. You let God use you to love others, to make a difference in their lives. To me, that's significance.
Gary is a hero. The Medal of Honor is the highest honor that America can award to one of its brave warriors, and he was one of them. But he didn't have peace because he hadn't come to the one who is the author of peace. And I want you to know that some of you right now watching have what's called post-traumatic stress syndrome. Some of you are still tormented by the war you've been in. You have seen blood. You have seen your friends killed. You have seen dismembered bodies. You may have suffered things yourself. It's terrible what goes on in war. And there's cold and there's privation, and in the jungle it's steamy hot. And where I was in Korea, it's freezing cold, minus 20 degrees temperature. I mean, it gets kind of uncomfortable. But these men and women, on the day that we celebrate, have endured all of that so that you and I might be free. So I want you to know that the greatest freedom comes when you are liberated from the past, when you're liberated from the demons that have haunted you, when you're liberated from habits that have caused you to fall and stumble, and you want to be free. That's what we fight for, is for freedom. And Jesus Christ said, for freedom I will set you free. I have come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. The devil comes to steal and to kill and to destroy, but I've come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. So if you'd like that life, right now, some of you, again, veterans, we're talking to you. If you want to be free, just pray with me right now and let the Lord of glory come in. The greatest hero who ever lived, the greatest man who ever lived, who's the greatest in all the conquerors, the warriors who ever walked the face of the earth. Jesus Christ is the one. If you want him now, on this special day, bow your head and say these words with me. Jesus, that's right. Pray with me and mean it in your heart. Jesus, you know what I've been through. You know what's happened to me. You know what I have done to others. And before you, Lord, I confess that I'm a sinner. And I thank you, Lord, that you endured the penalty of death for me, that you died on the cross that I might live. And so I take eternal life from you right now. I turn away from my sin, and I give you my heart. Thank you, Lord. In Jesus' name, thank you. Amen. Now, if you prayed with me, I want to make sure you get established in the Lord. If you would just pick up your phone and call in 1-800-700-7000. And I have something called a New Day that I'll be glad to give you. It's a teaching that I think will enrich your life and show you what you've just done. There's a compact disc here and also a little book of scripture, and I'll give it to you free. So please call in and say, look, I just prayed with Pat. I gave my heart to the Lord. 1-800-700-7000. And I'll send you this, a new day. Okay? Thank you.
Beautiful prayer, Pat. Thank you so much. And you can find out more about Gary's story in his new book. It's called Blaze of Light, and that's available nationwide. Still ahead, beautifully broken. This soldier lost both legs to a landmine. He spent the next 2 years in a military hospital. He and his wife reveal what restored him, coming up. And then later, Pat tackles some of life's toughest issues. Miriam writes, Pat, is it a sin to divorce an emotionally and verbally abusive spouse? Should I keep praying for reconciliation or move forward? What will Pat say to that? Stay tuned for another round of your questions, honest answers.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe and let us know where you're watching from in the comments below.
And welcome back to the 700 Club for this CBN News break. The Supreme Court heard a challenge to the Affordable Care Act Tuesday. The Trump administration and several red states are seeking to end Obamacare, arguing the court should get rid of the individual mandate ordering people to purchase health care. However, at least one conservative justice indicated ending the mandate does not mean the entire law should be struck down.
This is a very straightforward case for severability under our precedents, meaning that we would excise the mandate and leave the rest of the act in place.
The court's ruling is not expected to be released for several months. Eta regained hurricane strength this morning as Florida prepared for a second hit from the storm. The National Hurricane Center in Miami issued a hurricane watch for a 120-mile stretch that includes Tampa and St. Petersburg. Eta already unleashed a massive downpour on South Florida, flooding entire neighborhoods and filling some homes with rising waters. The rain also damaged one of Florida's largest COVID-19 testing sites at Miami-Dade County's Hard Rock Stadium. I want to remind you, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com. Pat and Wendy are back with more of today's 700 Club. It's coming up right after this.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe and let us know where you're watching from in the comments below.
Welcome back to the 700 Club. Well, Paige Wetzel says she didn't cry, but the shock of the news left her speechless. Her husband had been seriously hurt in Afghanistan. Just how seriously? Take a look.
In May 2012, Paige Wetzel received the kind of call that every military wife dreads. Her Army soldier husband, Josh, had stepped on an improvised explosive device while patrolling in Afghanistan. Josh's profound injuries included the loss of both legs, 2 broken arms, a broken vertebrae, and a traumatic brain injury. Their new book, Beautifully Broken, takes us on their journey through devastation and reveals how God made them whole again.
Paige and Josh are joining us now via Skype. Guys, welcome to the 700 Club.
Thanks for having us.
Well, Josh, you were on patrol in Afghanistan. What do you remember about that day?
I actually remember the entire thing. We were on a multi-day clearing mission, and I was leading the patrol with the metal detector because our main threat was improvised explosive devices. And so basically my job was to find them with the metal detector and clear them. And contrary to popular belief, I was pretty good at finding them. I was 33-1. The one got me. But I can remember, stepping on it, flying through the air, landing on the ground, and then thinking to myself, like, I've got to figure out, how to calm my medic down, because he was my best friend. And, you can imagine watching your best friend get injured like that. You're going to be extra, shaky. And so, all I could think about was how I could calm him down.
Paige, what was it like when you got that phone call?
Well, weeks leading up to his deployment, to his injury, the deployment had already been really rough. A lot of our friends had already been injured, and several people were getting taken to Kandahar for surgeries and things like that because of, just IEDs or just small arms fire. And we would get notified of those things. And so I was getting notifications of instances like that, once a week. And so the odds were just kind of building against the people that hadn't been wounded yet. And so it was about 6:30 in the morning on May 31st when I just got a phone call from a strange number, and I just knew that's what it was. So I ignored it, and I just thought, well, if it's important, they'll leave a voicemail. And then they left a voicemail, and I listened to it, and it was someone from the Department of the Army telling me to call them back. It was about the health status of my husband. And when I called them back, I just didn't know, obviously, the extent of the injuries, and there was no guarantee that Josh was going to survive. He was just, gravely wounded. And so they were reading off this list of injuries to me, and it was almost kind of like you can hear what's being said, but I tell people all the time, I felt like I was underwater, and I couldn't quite process what was being said. And it was just so shocking. But my biggest fear was the brain injury and believing that he was unconscious for like when he got injured. And so I was thankful to learn that he was trying to calm his guys down. He actually wasn't unconscious and remembered the whole thing. And that really just, just kind of his humor and his ability to still be who he was in that terrible moment really just kind of made me feel like, okay, we can deal with everything else.
Well, you guys spent the next 2 years at Walter Reed surrounded by other veterans and their families. What was that experience like for you, Josh?
For me, it was huge, honestly. We couldn't have been more blessed in that situation, to be in a hospital with men and women that are going through the exact same thing that I was going through. And so that made the physical part of our recovery easy, because I had somebody in physical therapy all the time that knew what I had gone through, but also knew how to push me. And when it came to that, I was on a mission to get better anyway. And I wanted, my guys that were back in Afghanistan to not have to worry about what was going on with me. And so, that in that aspect, we couldn't have been more blessed.
So the hard part really was after those 2 years, after you left Walter Reed and you wanted to jump back into normal life. What happened then?
You know, honestly, you know, in the military, you get, you know, the day you get in the military, it's just beat into your head from day one to always have a battle buddy. And, you know, that's somebody that's there to, you know, pick you up when you fall or to have your back when things get wild. And, you know, when I left the Army, I kind of lost that and I lost my purpose a little bit. And on the outside, things were going great. You know, we moved to Auburn, Alabama, and I started to finish my degree at Auburn University, and I graduated and everything. But on the inside, the devil was just isolating me further and further away from community and my family. And, you know, I was getting in a really dark place because I had lost that sense of community and that sense of service. And, you know, honestly, I'm just so thankful for my amazing wife, you know, who actually tricked me into going into a small group at our church and finding that community and realizing that, you know, I had an extreme fear to lead after my injury because, you know, when I got injured, I was leading. And so, you know, I you know, when I was leading, I got injured and then others subsequently got injured or killed. And so I just didn't want to lead in any aspect of my life, whether that was spiritually, in my family, you know, at work. I didn't even want to be the leader in a line going anywhere. And so, you know, I'm so thankful for my wife and everything that she did and sticking by my side through some really hard times. But yeah, I just, you know, it was huge to find community again once I got out of the military.
Well, there's so much more to your all story, and I know that there was a time where the marriage got really rocky, but God worked all that out for you guys. It's all in your new book called Beautifully Broken. I love this cover so much. It's absolutely gorgeous. An Unlikely Journey of Faith by Paige and Josh Wetzel. Order this book right now. You will be so blessed. It's Veterans Day. Let's support our veterans. Let's support Paige and Josh. Thank you for your service. Thank you for sharing your story, and God bless you both.
What a
beautiful
couple. What a great book and what a great story.
I know.
Beautifully
So glad they wrote it.
broken. Well, listen, I've got a story now about the horrors of the Holocaust. Nazi soldiers marched Zulia into a death camp. Zulia survived, but members of his family did not. Now Zulia is living in Israel, where the COVID lockdowns bring back memories of the Holocaust. Well, how does Zulia get his help? Take a look.
Zulia is an 84-year-old Holocaust survivor who lives in Israel. Because of the COVID-19 outbreak, he's been isolated for months. That's caused memories of the war to come flooding back.
There was no time to escape before the Nazis overran our village in Moldova. It was winter when we were forced to walk a death march, and I remember stepping over the many dead in the snow.
Zulia spent the rest of the war in a concentration camp, where his grandmother and sister died of starvation.
It's very hard to think back to those times. It feels like something stabbing my heart.
Israel has set strict rules that protect Zulia and other Holocaust survivors from the coronavirus, but he can't leave his home to get groceries. Not having enough food can create real trauma for Holocaust survivors, so CBN Israel volunteers from a local church regularly deliver bags of food to Zulia while wearing protective equipment to keep him safe.
I am very thankful for all your love and support. I have been in difficult situations before, and the Christians from the church have always been there to help me.
With the support of CBN Israel donors and volunteers, Zulia knows he won't be forgotten.
I don't have enough words to say thank you for all you have done for me. I believe we will make it through this time together.
Isn't that great? Something that we can do to help people, and we want to help our friends in Israel. We want to, you know, as I said about that Holocaust, never again, never again. We were just discussing, there's a movie that Steven Spielberg produced called Schindler's List, Liam Neeson, and it was a fabulous movie. I just happened to flip, I was going through the dial, and I picked it up. I saw it before, but it was the horrors of what was done.
It was brilliant. And then at the end, it's so moving when you have all the real, because this movie was made, what, 30 years ago. So then there was still a lot of the Holocaust survivors.
Still there.
And they were in the movie. It was amazing.
But that was it's what the devil does. The devil hates humans being made in God's image. And we want to stand with our Israeli friends, and we say never again.
Amen.
Okay.
We got some email for you. You ready?
Let's go for it.
All right,
Let's
here's
go for it.
Miriam writes in, Pat, is it a sin to divorce an emotionally and verbally abusive spouse? Should I keep praying for conviction and reconciliation or move forward? I feel like remarriage is adultery.
Well, I don't know how emotionally abusive it is. You know, there's something called the Pauline privilege. And, you know, if the abusive, ungodly spouse is pleased to depart, let them depart. The brother or sister isn't bound in a case like that. And I feel there's such a thing as constructive desertion when a spouse is so abusive that it's impossible to live with them. I think that brings about the Pauline privilege, because they essentially have left the marriage, and I think you're free.
Absolutely. I agree. Well, all right. Mara says, I was married to a covert narcissist that I left after multiple surgeries, which left me with a rare disease that has crippled me. How can I heal from my wounds, both spiritually and physically?
I think what you got to do is focus on the Lord. I mean, you've had a narcissistic husband, and he's left you, and you've got a crippling disease. I tell you, get your mind off of the image of what happened, get your mind off of your suffering, and focus them on Jesus, and you will be set free. That's what God wants to do.
Oh, that's a good word. That's a good word. All right, here's John. He says, in regard to our diet, in Daniel chapter 1, it talks about the food that he chose to consume, vegetables and water. By doing this at age 79, I've never felt better in my life. Is this something we should do all the time?
Well, I think, frankly, you've got to have some protein, and if you look at that Mexican diet, when you've got beans and corn, you've got 22 amino acids, and you do need protein in your diet. But, you know, if you can go to a grocery store, back in the freezers, there's something called Ezekiel bread, where they use that for. I like it. We have it. You toast it, and it's just a wonderful kind of bread. Okay.
But, you know, in that story about Daniel, he only did it for 10 days. You know, so I mean, there's benefits for 10 days for sure.
You don't, but it's dangerous if you just go veggie and you don't have enough protein. You will waste your muscles and you will destroy your body. So absolutely, you've got to get 22 amino acids in whatever you eat. Okay.
All right. Here's Paul. He says, I lost my daughter 7 years ago. I'm raising my grandson by myself because my wife divorced me. Now she's returning, but she still has this anger problem that she can't shake. Sometimes it's like a war. Should I keep forgiving her, or should I move on and see what I can do with the rest of my life? Thanks, Pat. I watch you every day.
I love what John Wesley, he had this awful woman he married. He was in love with one woman, and he married this other one. And she left him, and he said, I didn't send her away, and I'm not going to go get her. And I really think if your ex-spouse has left you, leave them alone. You don't have to pick it up again. We leave you today with these words from John. There is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friend. For Wendy and all of us, see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
The Name of God, a powerful teaching from the Christian Broadcasting Network.
God repeats over and over that He is with us.
You'll see exciting, true stories of God's providence in the lives of real people. The Name of God brings peace and security.
It brought me so much peace in a time of turmoil.
The Name of God provides for your needs.
It just took me to a place of joy.
The Name of God strengthens and protects.
And I've never been more sure that I was going to be protected.
Plus, you'll be encouraged by Gordon Robertson's special teaching on the Name of God.
And when you start thinking about good things, those are the things that God provides.
Become a CBN partner to get your DVD copy of The Name of God. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com.